All right, good morning and happy race day. Let's talk about the Cup Series picks at Martinsville. It's race three of round three of the playoffs. So after today's race, we will know who the final championship for will be going into Phoenix. Like the Xfinity race, or somewhat like the Xfinity race, this race is 500 laps. So it's one of the most highest scoring DFS weekends of the year. You need to nail those lap leaders. If you don't have the driver out front leading laps, you're going to be missing out on a ton of points. So let's keep that in mind today. We are building lineups. With 500 laps, we got a lot of points up for grabs from a dominator perspective. So we've got 125 up there for laps led and 225 points up for fast laps. It is our second time here. So we're really going to rely a little bit on the data from, the first Martinsville race, but really want to focus on, how that race played out, the racing product that we got. We noticed from that race that passing was very difficult. The temperatures are going to be a little bit warmer. They are bringing a different tire, slightly a different gear ratio, but for the most part, it was impossible to pass. It was just basically a single line freight train for the entire race. We really only saw two, main lap leaders, and they really got that track position because of their pit stops. How quickly they were getting on and off pit road. So if you're in between two drivers, I would try to find some pit road data, try to figure out what team has maybe been faster on average, or is maybe performing better of late, or maybe even look at what pit stalls these teams have, because pit road is going to be playing a large part today in the drivers who are going to be able to advance their position. Since we have 500 laps, track position is very important. We really want to try to focus on nailing those dominators versus just shoving in place differential plays, especially with how quickly these laps click off. It only takes them about 20 seconds to get around the track. If you don't have the driver up front leading laps, you're just going to be missing out on a ton of points. So for me personally, I want to try to get at least two lap leaders in my line, even potentially up to four, depending on, what drivers you think may or may not be able to get out front. The other thing you kind of have to keep in mind is points racing. It really only factors into, some of these playoff drivers. Like, for example, Christopher Bell is pretty much in a must-win scenario. Same with Chase Briscoe. Like, I don't really think they're going to be points racing. I think they're just going for the win. We obviously know Joey Logano is already locked into the playoffs, so he doesn't really care about points. But all the other playoff drivers, they have to be mindful of, where they are running, during stage one, stage two, and obviously stage three. They have to kind of keep that big picture in mind. So that'll be interesting to see how it pans out. Qualifying was super important. There were some drivers we really liked coming into this weekend, or really had fast cars in practice, but they slipped up in qualifying. So that's going to make it a very, difficult, challenging day for them. And then lastly, this could be the last week of content for 2022. We will not be available next weekend for the championship race. So this will be the final video of this year. We are planning to be back in 2023, but just want to say thanks for a great season. We've gained a ton of followers over on Twitter, on YouTube. So thank you guys for all the support. But getting into the picks, looking at the expensive range here, you got Larson, Hamlin, Elliott, Byron, Blaney, and Logano. Kind of surprised that Larson got the pole. He will admit that Martinsville is probably his worst track statistically. However, he did go out front and get the pole, which was kind of ironic. We saw Elliott and Byron basically dominate this race earlier in the spring. It's not, hard to imagine or unbelievable that Larson, being on the front row, isn't in prime position to lead a bulk of this race. Larson is still in contention for the Owners' Championship, so that kind of matters a little bit. I don't think he's just going to pull over and let Elliott buy him by any means. However, Larson is really expensive, and I think he's going to be extremely high owned. He is one of our favorite lap leaders, but just looking at his 2022, similar track type performances on this track type, he hasn't been very good. So I think Larson's going to carry a ton of ownership for cash games. I think he's a great option. I think he's fine for tournaments as well. But for me, I'm probably going to try to come in a little bit under the field on Larson. my three favorite lap leaders are going to be Larson, Elliott, and Blaney. So between the three of them, I probably want to try to get two of them into my line and then try to build the rest of my line either with maybe a potential third dominator, some place differential plays, or maybe some just good value plays. Denny Hamlin's expensive. Normally when we get to Martinsville, these short flat tracks, you just jam in JGR, like you would automatically play, play Hamlin, play Busch, play Bell, play Truex. But this year it's been a little bit of a different story. And starting 11th gives you a little bit of place differential. But if we're paying up for a 10K driver, I want them to be a potential lap leader. I just don't feel confident enough in Hamlin to get out front and lead laps. Probably my favorite play on the slate today, even more so than Larson, is going to be Elliott. Elliott gives you a little bit of a price discount. Starts on the front row. He led a ton of laps here in the spring race. It's been pretty good on these track types. He does need to point race his way in, or maybe even win his way into getting into the next round. I feel pretty confident that he'll be able to maintain that track position. Byron slipped up in qualifying. He had a really fast car in practice. But starting this deep is going to be hard to overcome. If you are playing Byron, I think the narrative is it's going to be more of a single lap leader type of race where either Larson, Elliott, or Blaney, or maybe even someone else dominates this race. They just are the sole lap leader. And then you compare that driver with Byron, who should give you some place differential and be more of a factor during stage 2 and stage 3 of this race. Blaney theoretically can points race his way in. He does have the track position to do it. This has been a good track type for him this year. His practice times look solid. He has great track position. So I really like Blaney as a lap leader. So again, for me, I want to try to get two of either Larson, Elliott, or Blaney into my lines and then try to build around them. Those are the drivers I feel the most confident in. Logano's already locked in, so he doesn't really have to worry too much about points. Starts 12th, gives you a little bit of place differential upside. I like Logano a lot more than Hamlin just because of the price discount, and I think Logano is going to run better than Hamlin as well. Not really a target play for us. Again, if you're playing Logano, you're kind of sacrificing maybe a potential lap leader. So same argument for Byron. If you're playing Logano, maybe it's more of a single, sole lap leader type of lineup construction that you're building. Ross is just someone I wasn't really landing on too much. He starts 9th. I don't feel confident he can get up to the lead. Truex starts really deep in the field, but his practice times looked awful. His 2022, similar track type data looks awful. And it's really surprising to see because normally, Truex would be the favorite coming into these types of races, but he's just been off, recently. So I think he's going to carry a lot of ownership, and I'd much rather just drop down and play Christopher Bell there. It gives you $200 price decrease. He's still eligible for the playoffs. He is in a must-win scenario, but we saw this team pull it off at the Charlotte Roval to advance to the next round. So it's not unrealistic for him to potentially win this race, but he has a very steep mountain decline starting midfield. It's going to take him a while to get through the field, but he has 500 laps to do it. All he cares about is just leading the last lap at the end of the race. So I still like him for DFS. I think he gives you some good place differential upside, and I'd much rather pay down for place differential than pay up for place differential. Kyle Busch, he's okay. Starts 18th. I don't mind if you're building multiple lines and you sprinkle some ownership there. But again, for me, out of all the JGR cars, I'd much rather play Christopher Bell. Harvick had terrible practice times, but however, his qualifying time was very encouraging. It was good. So I think his ownership might be a little bit lower of people looking at those practice times, but Harvick's run pretty well on these similar track types this year. More of a tournament play, starting 8th. I wish he was either a little bit cheaper or maybe starting a little bit closer to the front of the field. I don't know if we'll be able to get out front and lead laps. He definitely has the track position. Reddick might be a little bit of a trap play. He's not very good at these track types. He starts really deep in the field, though, so I think he's going to carry a lot of ownership. He should easily be able to make his way forward throughout this race. I just don't love all the ownership that I think he's going to get. So if you're playing tournaments, I'm going to try to come in a little under the field on Reddick just to get some leverage. But if you're playing cash games, I think Reddick is a solid option. Not really gaining Suarez today. Briscoe's interesting. I don't see really a lot of DFS people talking about Chase Briscoe. And I don't really know if you should target him by any means, but he starts third. He starts right behind Larson on the jump. He has that inside lane. Maybe he's very quickly and able to pass Elliott on the start. Maybe Elliott slots into third. For whatever reason, if Larson has an issue or, that team just misses on the setup or Briscoe's able to get out front. I mean, Briscoe's qualifying time was the exact same as Elliott's, and he'll even admit that he slipped up in qualifying. It was very realistic and possible that Briscoe could have got the pole. And at $8,000 starting third, if he's somehow able to get out front and lead laps, you're going to want that driver in your line. He's not a target play by any means, but I think if you're playing tournaments, you're trying to get a little bit different. I don't think he's going to carry a ton of ownership. And I really like the idea and the possibility of getting a lap leader for $8,000. So again, more of a guy you probably sprinkle into your line. I'm going to try to come in over the field on Briscoe just because I don't think he's going to be very high owned. Wallace, Allmendinger, and Dillon are all similar plays. They all kind of start middle of the pack. These are all track types and styles of racing where these drivers usually perform well. Bubba's looking for a bounce back week after being suspended. Allmendinger is a good road course guy, and Colleague has been running well as of late. And Austin Dillon had a really fast car here in the spring. I think he finished third. I know he was contending for the lead, in the spring race. So that's going to be encouraging. Awesome qualifying effort by Brad Keselowski, but I wish he started a little bit deeper in the field. I think he can maintain his track position. I just don't know if he'll be able to get out front and lead laps. If you are going to play Keselowski, you might as well just try to pay up for Chase Briscoe there. I feel more confident in Briscoe being a playoff driver, getting out front, leading laps than I do with Keselowski. Although Keselowski, this is one of his best track types. Craigston starts a little bit too close to the front of the field. Cindric's going to be a good place differential option. He's relatively safe. We know the Penske cars normally run pretty well on these short flat tracks. He just had a bad qualifying effort. Almirola is another target play for me today. Starts 15th, had really fast times in practice. Actually had the fastest lap average over, the 25 laps there, the long run. Now, granted, not all the cars ran that many laps in practice, but of the ones that did, Almirola was definitely trending in the right direction. Starts 15th, gives you some place differential, but upside there, has some good track position. Really like Almirola for both cash games and GPPs. 6K range. For me, some of the safer options are probably going to be Buescher and Jones just because of where they start. Not really to get to McDowell or Gibbs. It was crazy to see Ty Gibbs do what he did at the end of that Xfinity Series race, but we were talking about the Cup Series today. And Cole Custer. Cole Custer's fifth. It's kind of similar to Briscoe. I don't really think Custer's could get out front and lead laps. However, he started this close to the front of the field in the spring race and was able to maintain that track position all day until basically he had that tire issue, which put him further back. So I feel pretty confident that Custer can maintain his track position, and I think he needs to finish 8th to pay off his value today. Right around, I think 7th, 8th, 9th, kind of around there, which I think is possible. And if for whatever reason, if he's able to get out front and lead laps, a lap leader for $6,300. Again, for tournaments, I am willing to take a risk there. And then getting to the punt range, Stenhouse and Haley are fine options. I think Ty Dillon's going to be the safest just because of where he starts. Don't really need him to do much. We just need him to finish in the 20s. And then I don't really want to go lower than Ty Dillon. Normally, when we get to the short flat tracks that have this many laps, it would be a weekend to consider, some of these really bottom of the barrel punt plays, especially Cody Ware. Like, this is a prime example of normally when we would want to try to target Cody Ware to increase our lap leaders. However, we didn't see any cautions in the spring race. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of cautions today either. I just don't see a lot of cars DNFing from this race. So I think the upside of some of these pump plays on the bottom is extremely limited. So again, I think you want to try to get at least 2 lap leaders in your lines at the bare minimum. You probably want to try to get even more than that, potentially 3 or 4 in your lines, and then rounding out the rest of your lines with some place differential and some value plays. So that'll do it for the 2022 season as far as our content goes. But thank you guys again for a great season. Really appreciate all the support you've given us this year. Best of luck today, and let's try to end the year strong.